The sound of heavy artillery thundered across the landscape, a relentless roar that echoed through the valleys and hills of Europe. The sky, a dull grey, hung heavy with the weight of impending doom. In the chill of early winter, soldiers huddled in their trenches, their breath visible in the frigid air. On the battlefield, the ground was scarred and pockmarked, a testament to the fierce fighting that had raged for years. But amid this chaos, one question loomed large. How could a regime, so fanatical and seemingly invincible, crumble so rapidly? This question reveals a paradox at the heart of warfare. The Nazi regime, with its fervent ideology and tightly controlled military prowess, was believed to be unstoppable. Yet, as history shows, the collapse of such an imposing force can be swift and brutal. This episode isn't about the soldiers fighting on the front lines. It's about the invisible forces that decide wars. To understand the collapse of the Nazi forces, one must first reconstruct the context of the time. The early 1940s saw the world embroiled in a conflict that reshaped nations and ideologies. The Nazi regime, under Adolf Hitler, had established itself as a formidable power, believed by many to be on the brink of total domination. Propaganda painted a picture of invincibility, instilling a strong sense of confidence among German troops and civilians alike. Military doctrine emphasized blitzkrieg tactics, which relied on speed and surprise, allowing for rapid advances into enemy territory. The German forces, equipped with advanced technology and a well-trained army, expected to maintain their momentum throughout the war. To them, the idea of defeat seemed unfathomable. Many believed that their superior tactics and the might of their military-industrial complex would lead to a swift victory over the Allies. However, the Allies, particularly the United States, had their own expectations. They understood the staggering toll of war, but were also aware of the resilience and determination of their forces. American military leaders believed that, with time and resources, they could outlast the German forces. The vast industrial capabilities of the United States were seen as a decisive advantage, one that could tip the scales in their favor. As the war progressed, the realities on the ground began to clash with these expectations. The harsh winter of 1941-42, for instance, exposed the vulnerabilities of the German army. Despite their initial successes, they were not prepared for the brutal conditions that would soon engulf them. Soldiers faced frostbite and starvation, weakening their resolve. Reports from the front lines revealed a different story than the one told by propaganda. In the midst of this, the Allies were witnessing their own evolution. The United States, having entered the war in 1941, began mobilizing its vast resources. The production of tanks, aircraft, and other military equipment surged, creating a sense of optimism among American troops and their leaders. They understood that they were entering a long fight, one that would require endurance and strategy rather than quick victories. On both sides, there was a sense of certainty that belied the uncertainty of warfare. The Nazi regime believed in their ideological superiority, convinced that their vision for a new order would prevail. Meanwhile, the Allies, particularly the United States, were beginning to harness their potential, preparing for a battle of attrition that would test the limits of both sides. The prevailing belief was that warfare was a contest of technology, tactics, and sheer will. Yet, as the war unfolded, it became evident that the true essence of victory lay in adaptability and resilience. The rigidity of the Nazi ideology began to clash with the dynamic nature of warfare. By mid-1944, the tide had begun to turn. The Allies launched successful campaigns in North Africa and Italy, demonstrating the effectiveness of combined arms and coordinated strategies. The German forces found themselves stretched thin, their supply lines increasingly vulnerable. The reality of their situation starkly contrasted their earlier expectations, revealing the flaws in their planning and execution. In essence, the context leading to the collapse of the Nazi forces was complex and multifaceted. It was shaped by overconfidence, underestimations, and a failure to adapt to changing circumstances. As the war raged on, the beliefs and doctrines that had once seemed so certain began to unravel, setting the stage for a dramatic shift in power dynamics. One of the decisive factors that the Nazi regime failed to recognize was the importance of adaptability in warfare. Their rigid adherence to blitzkrieg tactics had initially brought them success, but as the war dragged on, this inflexibility became a liability. The German command underestimated the Allies' capacity to learn and adapt, believing that their technological superiority would be sufficient to secure victory. The Allies, particularly the United States, were not only producing vast quantities of war materials, but were also refining their strategies based on lessons learned from previous engagements. This adaptability allowed them to counter German tactics effectively. The German forces, however, clung to their established methods, failing to innovate in response to the evolving battlefield conditions. Moreover, the Nazi regime overlooked the significance of morale and public support. While they relied heavily on propaganda to maintain a facade of strength, cracks began to show among their own ranks. As casualties mounted and the realities of war became more apparent, discontent grew within the German population and military. This erosion of morale was something the regime could not afford, yet they failed to address it adequately. Another critical error was the underestimation of the logistical demands of a protracted war. The Nazi leadership believed that quick victories would secure their dominance, allowing them to dictate the terms of peace. However, as the conflict extended, the strains on supply lines and resources became increasingly evident. The inability to sustain their military operations over time put the German forces at a severe disadvantage. Furthermore, the Nazis underestimated the resolve and capacity of the United States. The entry of the US into the war marked a significant turning point. American industrial output and manpower provided a fresh influx of resources to the Allied cause, something the German High Command did not anticipate. This miscalculation highlighted a crucial blind spot in their strategic planning. Culturally, the Nazi regime's ideology fostered a belief in their ultimate victory, leading to a dangerous hubris. They envisioned a world order underpinned by their values, dismissing the possibility of defeat. This ideological rigidity blinded them to the practical realities of warfare, creating a disconnect between their ambitions and the actual conditions on the ground. The German leadership was also slow to react to the changing nature of warfare. As the Allies developed new tactics and technologies, the Nazis remained anchored to their established methods. This lack of innovation prevented them from effectively countering the Allies' advances, leading to significant losses in key battles. As the war progressed, the psychological impact of these failures began to manifest within the German ranks. The realization that their once feared military was vulnerable created a profound sense of despair. This psychological shift was a critical aspect of their decline, as confidence waned and doubt crept in. Ultimately, the failure to recognize these pivotal factors proved catastrophic. The Nazi regime's overconfidence, coupled with their inability to adapt and innovate, led to a series of miscalculations that would culminate in their eventual collapse. The lessons learned from this period would resonate long after the war, serving as a stark reminder of the importance of adaptability in the face of adversity. At the heart of the shifting tides of World War II was the emergence of advanced technology and processes that fundamentally altered the nature of warfare. One of the most significant developments was the mass production of military equipment, particularly tanks and aircraft. The American industrial machine, often referred to as the arsenal of democracy, played a crucial role in this transformation. The first pillar of this technological advantage was the introduction of assembly line production techniques. This allowed for the rapid manufacturing of military vehicles, significantly increasing the output of the US military. For instance, the production of the M4 Sherman tank reached staggering numbers, with over 49,000 units built by the end of the war. This level of production provided the Allies with a formidable armored force, outpacing the German ability to replace their lost equipment. The second pillar was the development of new technologies that enhanced the effectiveness of Allied forces on the battlefield. Innovations such as radar and improved artillery techniques allowed for better reconnaissance and targeting. The Allies could detect incoming aircraft and coordinate their responses more efficiently, diminishing the impact of German air superiority. This technological edge contributed to the gradual shift in momentum during critical battles. The third pillar was the integration of combined arms tactics. The Allies learned to coordinate their infantry, armor, and air support more effectively than the Germans. This approach allowed for a more dynamic and adaptable response to enemy movements, further complicating the German command's ability to maintain their advantage. The Allies' focus on collaboration among different military branches created a more cohesive fighting force. In contrast, the German forces struggled to keep pace with these advancements. Their reliance on established tactics prevented them from fully capitalizing on new technologies. As the war progressed, the Allies' ability to innovate and adapt put them in a position of strength, while the Germans became increasingly bogged down by their rigid strategies. The inability of the Nazi regime to invest in the necessary technological innovations also hindered their effectiveness. As resources became strained, prioritizing certain weapons systems over others led to gaps in capabilities. This strategic mismanagement left the German forces vulnerable at critical moments during the war, as they could not replace lost equipment or upgrade their technology as rapidly as the Allies. Moreover, the Allies' logistical capabilities were significantly enhanced by their industrial output. The ability to transport troops and supplies efficiently across vast distances was a crucial advantage. The German forces, on the other hand, faced logistical challenges that limited their operational flexibility and responsiveness. As these technological and logistical advantages became apparent, the German command found themselves at a disadvantage. The combination of superior production, innovative technology, and effective tactics allowed the Allies to exploit weaknesses in the German front. Ultimately, the technological transformation of warfare during World War II highlighted the critical importance of adaptability and innovation. The Allies' ability to harness these advancements contrasted sharply with the rigidity of the Nazi regime, paving the way for their eventual defeat. This shift in the balance of power was not merely a matter of superior weaponry, but rather the effective integration of technology and strategy on the battlefield. On June 6, 1944, the world watched as Allied forces launched a monumental invasion known as D-Day. The beaches of Normandy, France, were set to become the stage for one of the most significant battles in history. As dawn broke, thousands of soldiers crowded onto landing crafts, their hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. The air was thick with tension, the salty sea spray mingling with the sounds of distant gunfire from the German fortifications. The first wave of American troops landed under a barrage of enemy fire. The beach, codenamed Omaha, was a scene of chaos and confusion. Soldiers struggled against the surf, some falling to enemy bullets before they could even set foot on land. Amid the cacophony of explosions and cries for help, the realization began to dawn on the German defenders. This was not just another Allied attack, but a full-scale invasion that could change the course of the war. In the hours that followed, the tide turned in favor of the Allies. Reinforcements poured onto the beaches, and the German defenses began to falter. The coordinated efforts of American air support and naval bombardments created a critical opening for the ground troops. The psychological shock among the German forces was palpable. They had underestimated the scale and determination of the Allied assault. As the day progressed, the Allies pushed inland, capturing key positions and establishing a foothold in Europe. The German forces, initially confident in their defenses, found themselves scrambling to respond to the overwhelming numbers and relentless advance of the Allies. The realization that they could not halt the invasion began to set in, leading to a crisis in command and morale. By nightfall, the Allies had secured several beachheads, marking a turning point in the war. The successful landing at Normandy not only demonstrated the effectiveness of Allied planning and coordination, but also exposed the vulnerabilities of the Nazi regime. The psychological impact of this defeat reverberated throughout the German military, leading to a re-evaluation of their strategies and capabilities. As the Allies continued their advance, the significance of D-Day became clear. It was a decisive moment that initiated the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi control. The collapse of German defenses in Normandy marked the beginning of a relentless push towards Germany, altering the course of the war irreversibly. The lessons learned from the invasion resonated deeply within military circles. The successful execution of a massive amphibious assault demonstrated the importance of collaboration and adaptability in warfare. It was a clear indication that the Allies had not only the resources, but also the resolve to defeat the Nazi regime. The D-Day invasion served as a turning point that would lead to the eventual liberation of occupied territories and the downfall of the Nazi regime. The combination of effective planning, technological superiority, and the sheer determination of Allied forces created a formidable force that could not be easily countered. In the aftermath of this pivotal battle, the momentum shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. The German forces, once seen as invincible, were now faced with the grim reality of their situation. The collapse that followed would be swift and brutal, setting the stage for the end of the war in Europe. The arithmetic of victory in World War II reveals stark numbers that tell the story of the conflict's outcome. The United States' industrial capacity was a key factor, with production figures that dwarf those of the German war machine. By 1944, American factories were producing approximately 100,000 aircraft annually, compared to Germany's output of around 40,000. This disparity in air power played a critical role in gaining air superiority, crucial for success on the battlefield. In terms of land warfare, the Allies produced over 49,000 M4 Sherman tanks by the end of the war, while Germany manufactured around 30,000 of their Tiger tanks. The sheer volume of Allied armor provided them with a significant advantage, allowing for sustained offensives that the German forces could not match. This level of production translated directly into battlefield effectiveness, as the Allies could replace lost vehicles at a much faster rate. Logistics also played a pivotal role in the arithmetic of victory. The United States was able to transport troops and supplies efficiently, with an estimated 20 million tons of cargo shipped across the Atlantic. This logistical capability allowed the Allies to maintain a constant supply line, ensuring that frontline troops were well equipped and supported. In contrast, the German forces struggled to supply their troops, leading to shortages and operational limitations. Fuel consumption further highlights the differences in capability. The Allies employed a strategy that ensured they had ample fuel supplies for their vehicles and aircraft. By 1944, American forces consumed approximately 1.5 million barrels of oil per month, while the German military faced critical shortages that hampered their operations. This lack of fuel not only affected mobility, but also limited their ability to respond to Allied advances effectively. The impact of these numbers was profound. For instance, the ability to produce and deploy more tanks meant that the Allies could mount offensives that overwhelmed German defenses. The ratio of tanks to troops in key battles illustrated the growing disparity in capability. In some instances, Allied forces outnumbered German tanks by as much as 3-1, significantly tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. Additionally, the ability to sustain operations over time was a critical factor. The Allies' capacity to replace lost equipment and personnel allowed them to maintain pressure on the German front. By contrast, the German forces faced increasing difficulty in replenishing their ranks and replacing lost equipment, leading to a gradual erosion of their combat effectiveness. The arithmetic of victory also extends to casualties. Throughout the war, the Allies sustained significant losses, but the German military faced even higher casualty rates. By the end of the conflict, estimates indicate that Germany had lost approximately 5 million soldiers, while Allied forces incurred around 1 million casualties. This discrepancy in losses further weakened the German military's ability to mount an effective defense as the war progressed. Ultimately, these hard numbers underscore the vital role of industrial capacity, logistics, and resource management in determining the outcome of the war. The United States' ability to produce and sustain a massive military force contrasted sharply with Germany's struggles, culminating in a decisive victory for the Allies. This arithmetic of victory would echo through history, illustrating the importance of resources and strategy in warfare. The systemic consequences of the collapse of the Nazi regime were profound, reshaping the landscape of post-war Europe and altering military doctrines for generations to come. The failure of the German forces in World War II dismantled the myth of invincibility that had been cultivated by Nazi propaganda. The once feared German military was now viewed as fallible, leading to a re-evaluation of military strategies and doctrines across the globe. In the aftermath of the war, the Allies recognized the importance of adaptability and innovation in warfare. The lessons learned during the conflict emphasized the need for military organizations to be flexible and responsive to changing circumstances. This shift in thinking influenced post-war military doctrines, with a greater focus on joint operations and the integration of various branches of the armed forces. Moreover, the collapse of the Nazi regime led to significant geopolitical changes. The division of Germany into East and West marked the beginning of the Cold War, as competing ideologies clashed in the subsequent decades. The experiences of World War II informed the policies of both NATO and the Warsaw Pact, shaping military strategies and alliances that would define the latter half of the 20th century. The war also had lasting effects on the global order. The United States emerged as a superpower, leading to a shift in the balance of power. This newfound dominance prompted a rethinking of military alliances and international relations as nations sought to navigate the complexities of a post-war world. The lessons learned from the conflict underscored the importance of collective security and cooperation among nations. Additionally, the technological advancements developed during the war laid the groundwork for future innovations. The wartime experiences of the Allies led to the establishment of research and development programs that would drive technological progress in the ensuing decades. The integration of new technologies into military practices became a cornerstone of modern warfare, reflecting the lessons learned from the conflict. As societies grappled with the after-effects of the war, there was also a reckoning with the moral implications of the conflict. The atrocities committed under the Nazi regime prompted a global dialogue about human rights and the responsibilities of nations. The Nuremberg trials served as a pivotal moment in establishing accountability for war crimes, shaping international law and humanitarian standards. In the realm of military history, the collapse of the Nazi regime marked a significant turning point. The understanding of warfare evolved, with a greater emphasis on the interplay between strategy, logistics, and technology. The lessons learned from the German defeat would influence military theorists and practitioners for decades, as nations sought to avoid the pitfalls that had led to the downfall of such a formidable power. Ultimately, the systemic consequences of the Nazi collapse extended far beyond the battlefield. The war reshaped the geopolitical landscape, influenced military doctrine, and prompted a re-evaluation of the moral and ethical responsibilities of nations. The echoes of this conflict continue to resonate in contemporary discussions about warfare, strategy, and international relations, reminding us of the lessons learned from one of history's most significant events. The question of how a seemingly invincible regime could collapse in such a short period now finds its answer in the lessons of history. It wasn't the best military technology or tactics that won. It was the best system that adapted and evolved in the face of adversity. The failures of the Nazi regime reveal the critical importance of flexibility, innovation, and resilience in warfare. As the world reflects on these lessons, one compelling question remains: how will future conflicts be shaped by the mistakes of the past?